Sunday, the 8th of March, is International Women's Day. It's themed as an equal world is an enabled world. Among the issues in focus will be equality in business and wealth. So what gains have women made and what are the challenges they face, especially as far as access to finance is concerned? Let's examine this in a bit more detail. Nishdeep Sethi is the head of structured finance at the African Guarantee Fund. She's with me in studio right now. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Rama.
It's 2020. A lot of economies across this continent have been free and independent for a while. Why is it that we're still talking about barriers to access to finance for women, for basically half the population in 2020?
So, we must acknowledge that there have been major strides that have been made in closing the financial gap, just in general. But still, we see that women are lagging in this development. And this is mainly due to three broad issues under which many other challenges fall. The main one being financial gaps, the financial challenge, where we see that banking women is perceived to be riskier. And therefore, we find that financial institutions and banks tend to steer away from lending to that segment and taking on that additional risk.
Because that tends to be more often than not, I guess, a culture thing. Because if you've got, for lack of a better word, mostly male-dominated boards, male-dominated management, they will make these decisions based on biases, but not necessarily based on data.
Right.
And that's essentially how we end up with that problem.
Exactly. And you see, that's the thing, that a lot of these financial institutions, they aren't banking to women and the risk is perceived. And we feel that if they went ahead and actually took on this banking and provided services to this segment and recorded this data, they would actually see that this risk is not as high and imminent as they believe it to be.
Right. The other thing I think you alluded to a little earlier was the question of the market structure,
yes.
right? Because on one hand, you look at the labor market data that we
yes.
get in Kenya, and it's a near 50-50 split,
yes.
right, as far as labor force composition is concerned, roughly half men and women.
Yes.
But you then look at access to finance, and it's a completely different picture. Yeah. So how do we square that circle? What explains that difference?
So, as I said, the first is obviously the financial institutions that don't want to take on additional risk. But there's also the side of these women and these women entrepreneurs that also believe that banking for them is difficult, it's a challenge. And they tend to play more in the informal sector, and that's where they tend to be more prominent, and hence the reason for the gap. And we find that a lot of this lies with capacity issue, where a lot of the women entrepreneurs and women businesses have already been excluded from the financial sector because of this perceived risks. And they tend to then just move away from it. So there's this gap that needs to sort of be bridged between the female entrepreneurs and the female businesses and the financial institutions that are able to provide the banking services to them.
Right. Just one last question for you very, very quickly.
Sure.
Is it possible to essentially just take some of that risk off the table with banks? Because that's essentially what you guys do.
Exactly, right. So we at AGF, we act as catalysts for this kind of banking for this kind of segment, where we come in and we de-risk the bank's portfolio. We share the risk with them through our risk-sharing instruments, through guarantee activities. We also provide capacity development to these women entrepreneurs to ensure that they're credit ready for the financial, for the banks really, and really to bridge the gap between the banks and between the women entrepreneurs and the women businesses.
All right, Nishdeep Sethi, we'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Great.
Appreciate it.